Good evening, all. Good evening to the panelists. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. I'm just making sure.
I can hear you and see you.
Very nice. So good evening to the panelists, and I'll come back to the panelists. Good evening to our viewers in Tobago, in Trinidad, across the Caribbean, beyond the Caribbean, wherever in the world you are tuned in to this discussion organized by CivilNet Tobago. We also are on Facebook Live, so you can tune in there and you can tell your friends to do so as well. We have a distinguished panel that has been put together to discuss Tobagonian autonomy and governance, self-governance, I imagine, yes. This panel is an experienced panel. It's comprised of Elder Dumas, Reginald Dumas, former head of the public service, former and continuing ambassador by title, Ambassador Reginald Dumas, whom I like to call Elder Dumas. And he has been busy, his mind has been busy since retirement. And he looks younger than I, who am a younger man, and I'm happy for that. He looks very vibrant and his mind is quite, as we say in Tobago, collective. Welcome to the panel, Elder Dumas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ella.
And then we have Ho Choi Charles, who presents himself as being the humblest of men. He has been asked to join the panel, and without any fuss, he decided to come along. I would like to honor him by continuing to refer to him as former Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly. Of course, he was also a minister of a national minister, Minister of National Security. And of course, he's been active in various parties, one formed by the late A.N.R. Robinson, and the other formed by himself, I think. So, and of course, he was Chief Secretary, and I think he still carries the title, or I would like him to continue to carry the title. Welcome to the program, former Chief Secretary Ho Choi Charles.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother James, Dr. James. And sometimes when people ask me, I always just try to correct them, not to correct them, but to put some clarity to that. I am the first chief. You know,
first Chief Secretary, indeed,
we
yes.
have some former chiefs, but I'm the first. But
you're the first, yes, exactly.
First.
And that is something we must all be proud of. Certainly, you must be proud of it. And we must put that handle to you when we are talking to you, at least sometimes. Thank you for joining the panel. And then my brethren, Vanos James, Professor Vanos James, the distinguished Professor of Economics, Developmental Economics, Mathematical Economics, econometrician by practice, by profession, who has written quite a number of articles on Tobagonian autonomy and on the economies of the Caribbean. He has furthered, he has advanced the work and thinking of people like Sir Arthur Lewis and the late Arthur Lewis, of course, and the late Lloyd Best, who, of course, promoted independent thought. And Vanos is part of that tradition. And as I said, he has, I don't think anybody else has written more than Vanos on the economics of Tobago. And I am happy to have him join this distinguished panel. Welcome, Vanos.
Yeah, Winford. Well, thanks for the wonderful introduction. Let me put it that way. And I hope when you include me in such an illustrious panel, I hope I
Yes.
can do justice to the inclusion and help
I'm
the
sure they will lift you up
issues.
if you unexpectedly look like you're falling.
Yeah, I tell you, yeah, indeed.
Yes, they have enough social intelligence and political understanding to lift you up. I might myself lend a hand. This is a discussion, ladies and gentlemen, organized by the CivilNet Society in Tobago. The CivilNet is a non-aligned group of Tobago civil society and concerned citizens. And they are live, we are live on Facebook, as I said. And if you've been sent a link, you probably are live on Zoom as well. I want to begin the conversation with Elder Dumas, Ambassador Dumas, and ask him to speak for about 2 minutes on his sense of Tobagonian autonomy as it stands today, the 17th of December 2020.
Chairman, I would need to speak for more than 2 minutes, but I will follow the
Yes.
instructions for the time being, because I know that
How much time?
I
Because I want to give everybody the same time. How much time do you think you'll take as an opening? 5?
Maybe more, but let's leave it at 2, and then
Yes, and then
we'll
come
see how
back.
it goes later.
Okay, thank you.
And then come back.
Yes.
But I have to say that on this question of autonomy and internal self-government, I am this evening a very disappointed person. I'm disappointed because here we are on the 17th of December 2020, still talking about Tobago internal self-government. And we don't seem to be, in spite of all the documents and the draft bills and the legislation that has been passed, we don't seem to have made the progress that I was hoping by now we would have made. I attended the meeting on the 14th of January 1977. That is nearly 44 years ago, Jim.
Wow.
In Parliament, when Mr. Robinson introduced his motion on internal self-government. The idea was that there should be internal self-government for Tobago in that year, 1977. And here we are in 2020, December 2020, nearly 44 years later, still talking about it. So in the course of the discussion, in the course of the evening, I would like to focus to some extent on what has happened. Why has this process not gone where one expected it to go? And one, like me and you and others, have hoped that it will go. And there I'll stop for the time being.
Thank you very much. Brilliant opening. Nicely summarized. Can we go to the first Chief Secretary now for his opening salvo? Mr. Charles, first Chief Secretary.
Well, as you know, that I have been involved in the process from day one, even from the preparation of the motion. Most of the work that was done for the motion itself, apart from the work that was done by Mr. Robinson, his wife, and others in Trinidad, most of the work that was done here in Tobago, the research work was done by 3 of us: Sidman Murray, myself, and Brother Everett John.
Right.
And we need to put those things down sometime later on, not in this discourse, maybe.
Right.
We'll talk about that. And what would have, and I will come to Reggie there in my 2 minutes, what he just said. You would remember that the DAC, Robinson and Murray, they were the 2 representatives of the DAC that contested the general elections in Trinidad and Tobago. We had 36 seats in the parliament at that time. And we lost all seats in Trinidad, the DAC that is. but we won the 2 Tobago seats. And it was the first time from 1956 to that time that the People's National Movement, that was government, lost these seats in Tobago. And the Prime Minister and the government then, the PNM government then, and we put it this way as an act of reprisal against the people for voting the way they voted, would have broken up the one administration we had in Tobago, which was the Ministry for Tobago Affairs, and you know the disaster of that, where, as you know, the Ministry for Tobago Affairs was the coordinating.
I was a victim of the breakup.
What I'm telling you was the coordinating agency of all the ministries from Trinidad, right. Education, works, and health, and so on. I'm going to be very brief on this. And wives were sent to Trinidad, husband in Tobago, and so on. It created a serious problem of family, this union, breaking up of families, and so on. And I think that means we sat down and said, no. We cannot allow the island of Tobago to continue to depend for its structure of government and for its governance on the whims and fancies of a political leader or prime minister in Trinidad. We need a permanent structure of government in Tobago. That nobody can break up like that. It must be subject to the suffrage of the adult Tobagonian. And that it was the basis for that motion being moved. In fact, it was filed to be debated on Human Rights Day on the 10th of December 1996. And you could remember the debate on that issue where there was a correspondence moving between the speaker and the move of the person who filed that motion, and Mr. Robinson and so on. And then it was debated, as Reggie would have said quite correctly, in 1977.
And just hold it there now. I mean, that is a good enough opening. We will come back to some of those ideas.
Good.
So thank you for that. And we will go now to Professor Vanos for his opening remarks.
Well, listening to the two erudite seniors here, we're in for a treat tonight, and I am in for a big learning experience. But as an economist, the thing that keeps persuading me is what exactly Tobago has been trying to achieve since 1884 and what we are trying to achieve today still. And so I have nothing but a scientific perspective that says, look, our fundamental problem is that we are unable to muster the resources to invest in building our capacity to compete for economic space in the country and in the world. And we can't give up on that. We need fundamental reforms in the nation to deal with that. And if we get that done, we will also build capacity in the nation to compete on the global stage and on the local stage. So autonomy for me is not a historical matter of the past. It's an imperative for the future, something that Tobago must lead the nation in pursuing as a matter of urgency, because it is critical to the fundamental agenda of development and diversification of the economy as an attendant set of achievements.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vanos, for that opening statement. And I have not been told that we should go on a break, but I believe some 15 minutes have passed. But when that time comes, we want to go back to Elder Dumas, who was saying that this matter arose 44 years ago. And today we are still talking about governance and self-government for Tobago. I wonder whether the good ambassador, the goodly ambassador, could tell us what he thinks might be responsible for the insufficiency of action from 44 years ago.
I think very simply a lack of political will. I've always said, I tell people all the time, that this country is still being run by Eric Williams. in the sense that the pattern of governance that he put in place is the one that we still follow. It's a top-down pattern of governance. What we hear about is the cabinet, what the cabinet has decided, and what this minister has done, and what the prime minister has done, etc., etc. And that is what we are still following. Robinson's motion was severely criticized at the time by the government. The Attorney General at the time, Selwyn Richardson, said that what Robinson wanted to do was to cause a disintegration of the unitary state. Now, the fact that the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago makes absolutely no mention of a unitary state, describes Trinidad and Tobago as a sovereign democratic state. There's no mention of the phrase unitary state. But that is what we have come to believe Trinidad and Tobago is, that it has to be a unitary state. And this has, from one administration to the next, it doesn't matter which party is in office. That is what has been happening. That the people in Port of Spain, whoever it is, say that the control, they put it nicely in legal language, but what they mean politically is that the control of Tobago must reside in Port of Spain. And I have not been able in 44 years to discern any political will of any administration, I repeat, of any administration, to sit down seriously with the people of Tobago and say, look, let us talk about internal self-government, a meaningful internal self-government. Because the politics, Vanas talks about economics, but the politics always supersedes and always dominates the economics. And we remain in this situation even today, where there is supposed to be a draft bill, which we were told in June 2018 by the chairperson of the relevant Joint Select Committee of Parliament, would be laid in Parliament not later than the end of that year, December 2018. We are now in December 2020. Nothing has happened. So, in short, Chairman, an absence of political will.
Thank you. And just before I move on to the first Chief Secretary, you are seeing an absence of political will despite the presence of a Tobago House of Assembly ushered in 1980, and of course, with Act number 40 of 1996 following thereafter. You're saying that these are not indices of political will. Because I think part of what you said is that there was no meaningful autonomy, I think you said.
No political will, yes. I mean, these are Act number 37 of 1980.
Right.
In fact, Section 21, following Robinson's motion of 77, in fact, in writing says that the THA is to carry out in Tobago government policy.
That's correct.
The Trinidad and Tobago central government policy, not policy carried out by the THA.
Right.
The THA was not supposed to have any policy except to carry out government policy.
Yeah.
And in 1996, okay, they removed that phrase, but they put in the phrase in section, I think, 25 of the THA Act, that subject to section 75(1) of the Constitution, such and such.
Right.
And when you look at section 75, what you see is there shall be a cabinet. And in the debate on that 96 Act, in the debate in the Senate, the then Attorney General, reflecting precisely the sentiment of Mr. Richardson several years earlier, said all the matters on the fifth schedule, which the THA likes to think matters that the THA has responsibility for, all the matters on the fifth schedule will be matters of national policy. And he went on to say, and what is wrong with that? So
I
where
believe
is
you're
the
referring to Ramesh
autonomy?
Lawrence Maraj.
I'm referring indeed to Mr. Ramesh Lawrence.
All right. We just want to make sure that our listeners understand that. I'll come back to you, sir. First, Chief Secretary, you heard what Elder Dumas has said, and you yourself said that there was a breakup of the Ministry of Tobago Affairs after the PNM lost the 2 Tobago seats in 1976. Would you say, First Chief Secretary, would you say that the return of the House of Assembly in 1980 and its confirmation in 1996, would you say that that represented the kind of administrative structure that you had in mind after the breakup of the Ministry of Tobago Affairs in 1976? Mr. Charles?
Are you hearing me?
No, I can now hear you.
Right, yeah, because I
Did
think
you hear
that
the question?
Yes, I heard the question and I answered. I said the answer is no.
Right, go ahead from there.
The legislation, the decision of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and I think Mr. Dumas mentioned it, the decision that was taken by the Parliament in 1977, and it was unanimous in both houses of Parliament, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, was that Tobago should have its internal self-government in 1977. And internal self-government really meant that the people of Tobago would have the power to determine how we are governed and how we develop. We got no form, no part of government, because as you would know, the powers of government are of three kinds. And we're talking internal self-government. And powers of government are of three kinds: legislative, executive, and judicial. The first Tobago House of Assembly, and I think Mr. Dumas mentioned it, I don't need to go over it and so on. The first Tobago House of Assembly that came by the first piece of legislation that came out of the decision that was made by the Parliament to give us internal self-government.
Yeah, but you are, what I'm interested in is what I'm interested in, Mr. Charles, is your position on that matter, that the coming into being again of the House of Assembly in 1980 was not any true representation of your expectations in 1977.
That was contrary. I'm making the point that it was even contrary to the decision of Parliament. Right. I'm making a stronger point than that.
Right.
That was not the decision made by Parliament.
But that's what Tobago had to live with.
That's the point I'm making. And I would explain something more on that very quickly to you.
Yes.
That the piece of legislation, Act Number 37 of 1980, the first piece of legislation that was passed to give effect to the decision of Parliament for Tobago to have its internal self-government to determine how we are governed and how Tobago is operated, give us no measure, no form, no part of government, because we did not have a legislature. We can't pass any laws. We did not have an executive in Tobago. We just carrying out somebody's decision in Trinidad. And in fact, the judiciary is completely out. So we are no form.
What happened in 1996?
That's the point. Well, sometimes these discussions, sometimes when you rush them like this, sometimes the country and the world don't have it, but I will have to answer you. In 1996,
well, I hope that I'm not rushing you. I think it's part of the chain of...
True. In 1996, you would remember, it was 1717-2. 1717-2 that formed the government. It was 17 PNM that won that election, 17 UNC, and 2 NAR. Mrs. Nicholson and Mr. Robinson, and they went back with the legislation because they did not have the majority to pass the legislation before. And this piece of legislation to give Tobago what we not only expected, but what was agreed to in 1977, it requires a specific majority, 2/3 in the House of Representatives, in fact, 3/4. of the House of Representatives, the votes of the House, and I think it's 2/3 in the Senate. We didn't have that. We had 19 votes in that parliament, and the PNM was the opposition, and they decided that they were not going to support the legislation. So we ended up with Act number 40 of 1996 that did not give us self-government. In fact, it improved what we had before, but it did not give us any form of self-government. We do have an executive here, cabinet still runs the show. We don't have a legislator to pass laws in Tobago, and we don't have the judiciary before us. So what is required to be done now, not only our expectation, but the whole of Tobago's expectation, and what the parliament had agreed on in 1977, we now must have that done. And that is what the legislation that is now before parliament is intended to do.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to Vanus. Professor James, are you there?
I am.
Vanus, are you there? Right.
I'm in school here learning.
Before you come in, let me just say something.
We are all in school.
Charts is going back to 1977, when the parliament unanimously agreed to grant Tobago real self-governance. He's lamenting the fact that the House of Assembly came into being again in 1980, and it did not bring with it the kind of self-governance that he expected based on what happened in 1977. He's saying the matter did not change in 1996. And he makes the statement that Tobago does not even have an executive council. It's all run by cabinet. As an economist, does the history of these political changes that are going nowhere or have gone nowhere matter? Or to what extent does this lack of real action after so many years matter to you as an economist who has spent a lot of your time studying Tobago's economy?
I say, what both Reggie and Hocho are talking about is everything. If we are unable to engineer the political changes we need to allow the people of Tobago to pursue development as a process, we will stay dependent on Trinidad forevermore. And Trinidad is in a position that I describe, an economist would describe as moral hazard. When they do nothing, Tobago becomes a tool for Trinidad development. They are able to win in the battle for our labor resources, so they attract our skilled workers to Trinidad, they attract our unskilled workers to Trinidad, and they get to use that, especially the skilled workers, to grow. Reggie was part of the long line of eminent Tobago scholars who ended up running Trinidad, for that matter. Not to say anything about men like Victor Bruce and Eugene Moore and so on. This is a long history we have. The most recent includes Dr. Winford James. And when Tobago loses in that battle for resources, what happens is that it loses the capacity to build its competitive capabilities, balance the economic equation with Trinidad, and take its rightful place side by side. So what Hochoy and Reggie are talking about is pretty much the whole story. The THA, let me make this last comment to stay within the time frame. The thing that strikes me as an economist is that the THA is a constitutional dictatorship. It is pure executive. There is no Tobago built-in legislative oversight mechanism. There is no legislature on the scale required to set up oversight institutions. And on top of that, our financial hands are in the lion's mouth in Trinidad, so they get to set us up so we are unable to take our own steps to fix that kind of dependence on them.
Well,
so this is a bad situation we're in. it needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency.
Well, two issues I want you to address before I repeat the cycle of presentations. One is the importance of knowledge of that history, of Tobago's search for independence, knowledge of that history in the population, how important it is. And secondly, whether you went back as far as 1884, whether your sense of Tobago's need for self-government, to what extent that is linked to what Ho Choi Charles has been talking about an agreement among parliamentarians in both houses, unanimous agreement in 1977. I want to see the extent to which there's confluence between what you are saying that began in 1884 and what Ho Choi is saying began in 1977. But first, a comment on the importance of the political history that we are engaged in now to the population.
Yeah, the young people need to get on top of the history from 1884 to now, and to understand what happened in 1889. What happened between 1884 and 89 was the crash of the Tobago economy. And with that crash came the loss of the financial capability to finance new initiatives towards development. Not that Caribbean countries are famous for taking whatever Tobago lost and use it to develop their competitive capabilities. But nonetheless, Tobagonians understand better today what that requires. And we have lost since 1884 the capacity to finance it for ourselves. So today, where we are, what young people need to understand is that where we are today is that we are completely dependent on Trinidad, not just on Trinidad and Tobago, on the Trinidad economy to finance our capacity for development of competitive capabilities. And we need to get that share, not at the whim of the Ministry of Finance, but as a straightforward, adequate constitutional provision. So what Ho Choi and Reggie is talking about, if you don't have the political will and the people of Tobago are not prepared to take to the streets and fight to create the political environment in which we could get a fair share of the financial resources to reset our economy, we will stay in the wilderness forever. So as far as I'm concerned, we really are having one discussion. What Tobago is trying to do is develop. For it to develop, it needs to set up a particular type of economic program, which Trinidad has no interest in. If Tobago develops, it develops the nation, and Tobagonians need to master that set of ideas and rekindle rediscover the courage to fight and keep fighting and never lose sight of that prize. If ever we lose sight, and if the young people don't learn, we are going to be in jail for a long, long time.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Vanus. And this is a reminder that this discussion is coming to you on the auspices of Tobago Civil Net Society. This is Civil Net is a non-aligned group of Tobago civil society. There are different organizations, but this is a non-aligned group of Tobago civil society and concerned citizens. Vanus, that was a mouthful, and I'm sure there's more that you can give us in terms of detail. But I want to go back to Elder Dumas now and ask him if he agrees with you. You made a statement at the end of your presentation, your last presentation, that this political will must be repaired and regained via the streets and on the backs of young people. Elder Dumas, do you concur with that perspective?
The one thing that politicians, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but everywhere else in my experience understand is pressure from the beach. Otherwise, in a top-down situation like the one we have in this country and have always had, the politicians get away with a lot. So it is up to the people, and I totally agree with Valas, that the pressures have to come from it. If the people of Tobago want internal self-government, then it is up to the people of Tobago to make that clear and to bring pressure to bear, not only on the government, but also on the opposition, to say, this is what we want and this is why we want it. Now, and we better do that soon. The people of Tobago better do that, start doing that soon.
Okay.
Otherwise, we might as well, sort of give up things. You have a situation now, to make things even worse. You have a situation now in the parliament in which the
So we have a frozen screen here on my end. I wonder if one of the administrators can intervene here and help us to hear Reggie again. Yes, okay, we'll come back to him. This is a reminder that the discussion is coming to you through the auspices of CivilNet, an online group of Tobago civil society. Elder Dumas, if you're back on stream, please intervene because we missed you for about 2-3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, fine. I was about to say that to make things worse, what happened last week in Parliament is that the opposition announced a new policy that until the government brought back the Procurement Act, which was passed, as you know, in both houses, with some slight modifications in the Senate, I understand, which may please some people, but certainly don't please me. Until the Procurement Act comes back, the opposition has said it will not be supporting any legislation put forward by the government, which would include, of course, the current THA Act, which has to be passed by a special majority because it amends a particular section of the Constitution, section 54 of the Constitution, and therefore,
let me just intervene to say, you're assuming that something will be laid in the Parliament soon. Or are you looking ahead to the last year of this term?
I would to say there might be nothing laid at all, because if they've announced this policy, what is the point of laying anything?
Well, yes.
There needs a 3/4 majority in the House and a 2/3 majority in the Senate to amend the Act because of the amendment to the Constitution, or to bring in a new Act altogether, so that Tobago is further disadvantaged in this area of internal self-government and autonomy. Nonetheless, I take Vanessa's point, and I think he's absolutely right, that whatever the difficulties in the Parliament at the moment because of the back and forth and the confrontation between government and opposition, having necessarily nothing to do with Tobago, whatever that be the case there, the fact is that the people of Tobago must make it clear, loud and clear, by, if necessary, marching in the streets. I know that people here don't like to march, but that this is what they want, and this is why they want it.
Thank you.
Failing that, you may have a problem.
Well, you have put the idea of autonomy among the issues that should be discussed in these House of Assembly elections. You put it on the table here. And I imagine that both parties are listening to this conversation and are hearing the challenge that you have put out there for the current group of electors in Tobago, especially the young people. Let me ask Chief Secretary Hochoy Charles whether he agrees that this matter has to be resolved by a determination of the current generation of electors, particularly the young people, in getting government to listen by being aggressive about the need for the kind of autonomy that all three panelists have called for. First Chief Secretary, your turn again.
Well, as you know, that has been our mantra, my mantra for all the years, the 40-something years. That has been it. And as you would know that Dr. James and I, we would have done a lot of work, including the Tobago Development Plan that would have been written for the 15-year development plan. But let me come back to the issue that we must understand that power concedes nothing without a demand, and a serious demand. And I think you put it well, Dr. Winford James, that we need to do that now. And this is why when somebody raised the matter before, I think it was you yourself in one of your questioning and so on, would have talked about the education, and I think yeah, Dr. Vanus James also, from 1884, 1889, what would have happened? We need to do that education, but let me come to between 76, 1977 and now. When the matter was unanimously passed by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, we knew why they had to pass it, although they had opposed it. And as you know, during that time, there was a motion being circulated throughout Trinidad and Tobago and in Tobago space to oppose the motion for self-government. When that was done, because of the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory to the United Nations Charter, which says, and I just paraphrase, that it is every single people have a right to the self-determination. We knew that they had to support it. But listen to what took place immediately after the unanimous decision of the Parliament. We prepared a document on that we call the Tobago Human Rights Dilemma. I am going to make copies available to you. It was made available to the Caribbean, made available to Tobago, made available to the public. And he talks about what happened immediately after the Parliament unanimously passed that resolution to grant Tobago its international government in 77. What he said is, the ministers of government just came out of the parliament, I mean ministers of the government, just came out of the Parliament and unanimously passed that legislation. And all of them said, we have no intention of implementing it. That very year, 1976, because remember there was an election, the 1976 election, which they lost in Tobago, but they won it and formed the government. They would have gone to a convention that very year, that's the down at Chagaramas, and they repudiated the decision which they had just taken in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago.
Wow,
so
wow.
There's a document which was prepared on that, we took that in January 26, 1979, to the country. Why self-government, why we did it and so on. It's available and so on. So we knew the problem we are now getting, we knew that the PNM government had no intention whatever. But because of the fact that they are signatory to the United Nations Charter that says that you have to give the people a self-government, they went and voted for it. And when they turned their back on it and so on, repudiated it and so on. So we knew. And let me just correct something
just hold a bit there. I mean, that's a mouthful. So that in 1977, there was that kind of deception, perhaps.
Yes.
Certainly, yes, that's what I'm hearing from you. That they agreed one moment and the next moment they declared that they were not supporting. And we are talking 1977 to now. Dr. Rowley allowed the bill to lapse in Parliament. Now that bill, please correct me if I'm wrong, you were a critical instrument to the formation of that bill. The 2016 bill, I think it was, that went to the joint
committee of Parliament.
Joint, yes.
The joint
you were a critical part in its formation, in the shaping. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were some of the items there similar to items in the 1977 agreement?
Well, in fact,
yes.
Yeah.
I want to know the extent to which there was co-articulation between what was agreed in 1977 and what was contained in the 2016 bill. The extent to which there was overlap, there was confluence, there was agreement, and so on.
Well, that's what I'm answering. I want to just say to you very quickly that I started off saying to you and saying to the panel this evening and saying to the world who's listening, those who are listening to this, that we did not get any part of government. And that bill was attempting to make sure that Tobago has an executive in Tobago that is not subject to the whims and fancy of the cabinet in Trinidad, that we make our decisions in Tobago, and that we have the lawmaking institution, which is a legislature that can pass those laws in Tobago for the good governance of the people of Tobago. Everything, that is what that was doing.
And that came back in the 2016 bill.
That is either 2017 or 2018, because remember there was a 2016 one with John Prince and all the others and so on.
Right.
But that was the latest one. It does not, in fact, somebody made a statement today in our conversation here that the bill or something like that did not capture certain, and that's quite true. Oh yes, something about dictatorship. Banas, I think, he made that particular point, and it's quite right.
He talked about that being a constitutional dictatorship.
Something like that. And I'm saying to you, I want to say, you remember when that thing came up in the bill was prepared in Tobago before it was passed there by the people of Tobago and sent down to Trinidad. Remember, there were two bills, a bill A and a bill B.
Right.
People were saying that there may not be fundamental difference. There was a bill B because some of us on that, what we call the forum, took the position that what in fact you are doing in Bill A is to do just what Vanos was saying, putting in a constitutional dictatorship inside there where there is no oversight, and that is why we attempted to do something about the People's House and that kind of stuff and so on to have oversight over the. That's right. And then that the assembly itself, as it is now constituted, would have had elected members, and they were not going to be the secretaries at all in the House of Assembly, because you cannot have the same institution as lawmakers, the same institution also implementing the laws.
As the executive.
Looking at it. That's right, the executive.
You have to separate the executive from the legislature.
From the legislature and from the.
So
if you don't do that, you have tyranny.
Right. Let me go now to Professor Vanos, and before I do so, just to remind my viewers, our viewers, that this discussion has been put on by CivilNet, a non-aligned group of Tobago civil society, and one commentator said that the discussion is going wonderfully well. It's moving at a nice, has a nice flow. Okay, so we go now to Professor Vanos, and we ask Vanos, I think the autonomy has been put on the agenda for these elections, the elections coming up on January 25th. Do you suppose that that will be one of the items that the PNM will be talking to the population about again? Or do you think PDP will be the only party that will discuss that matter on the platform with the people? What is your take on the willingness of the parties to discuss what you think is really the issue, an issue that comprehends other issues, but they all come back and dovetail to the issue of the kind of autonomy Tobago will have? Do you think the parties, in particular the PNM, will address that issue across the island? Professor Vanos, are you there?
I have never had lofty expectations of the PNM ever since the days of Eric Williams, and I don't have that now. And if you look at what Rowley has been doing in the parliament with respect to Tobago, you find evidence that supports my, let me use the word disdain for PNM practice. But I think if I were in the position of the other parties in Tobago, I would not let the people live without clear leadership on this issue. Because without autonomy, Tobago goes nowhere. And the parties that are in the opposition, the PDP and so on, ought to make it very clear that if we are to get better jobs for young people, better than CPEP and URP, and low-end clerical work in the THA, if we are to ensure that Tobago sits side by side with Trinidad rather than being dependent on it, autonomy is the critical first step, which is why I agreed at the very start with both Ochoa and Reggie that everything is all about the governance arrangements that we could put in place. Winford, let me provide the people. It is my responsibility as an economist on the panel to let the people know some of the data.
Right.
Let me provide people with the evidence on what continuing domination by Trinidad of the budgetary arrangements of the country, what it really means. In the 20 years, 21 years really, since the Dispute Resolution Commission issued its judgment, Trinidad has spent about 20 times the public development investment money, 20 times what Tobago has spent. On that basis, Tobago has no chance. The budget of Tobago, 11.4 times what we collect in revenues in Tobago is what we get as budgetary subventions from Trinidad. 91% of our expenditure is funded by the Trinidad economy. The people of Tobago can't be talking about self-respect and development and all of those kinds of things running a system like that. It's completely disgraceful for us to be talking, after listening to Ochoa and Reggie from 1976 to now. 2020 is no time for us to be complacent and cozy about the state of the Tobago economy. In between, let me just give you one last piece of data. Between 2012 and now, the economy of Tobago has declined by about 18%. We used to produce about $2.2 billion worth of output in 2012. Now we're producing about 1.5 billion. This is nothing but a major disaster of dependence, not unlike what the Caribbean countries used to have with Britain in the immediate post-slavery period.
So Vanas, let me just intervene here.
And move on.
Let me just intervene here. Don't go. So what you're saying here is that the PNM does not have the politics to engage with the people about these matters in this cycle of elections. I'm hearing that clearly.
They're not interested.
So
I don't think they're interested. If they were interested, they would put the bill in the parliament.
Right. But it would be in the interest of the PDP to do so. Do they have the capacity to hold that kind of conversation? Have they demonstrated that they have the capacity to engage with Tobago on the matters, the data that you have just presented?
Absolutely, because if as Robinson's movement demonstrated, when all is said and done, the way Tobagonians fight for change is they bring all the non-PNM resources to bear on the issue. You go to everybody and you say, look, this is one fight. This is a fight for Tobago's future. Ochoa come, Reggie come, Vanos come, Winford come, and so on. And let's talk to the people of Tobago about their destiny, not about PDP or One Voice or anything like that. Where is Tobago going? That's the stance that I saw Robinson taking. Robinson was a very open man when it came to that particular approach to the thing. He brought Ochoa, he brought Benny, he brought Pamela, he brought all sorts of different types of persons together to fight this battle for internal self-government. And that was the only thing that you could credit Robinson with doing
But apparently that has
it
not
needs to be done again, and that's what the PDP
been
and
enough.
Ochoa and them should be doing.
Well, yes, but they're still talking, as you see. They are part of the panel. Ochoa is here.
But that is not.
Clearly, the effort has not been enough. Yes, Ochoa, you're going to say something.
I was just saying that that has been the struggle, the fight, and that is why the organization that I belong to in Tobago, the name is, I'm sure that you find it a very strange name for a political organization. One Tobago Voice. One Tobago Voice. And that was the purpose. What Vanos just said was the purpose of having that, to bring all the parties together to speak with that particular voice and to articulate for Tobago self-government. When that is done,
hopeful? Are you hopeful, First Chief Secretary?
Well, this requires another kind of conversation. But I'm just saying, it requires that, because we have met with all, and we know the position why everybody is not on board. Even the PNM. Even the PNM, when we started the forum after the 2013 election and started to prepare this bill, they didn't understand what we were doing, because they are stand alone, fight alone, die alone. So when we had the forum, they found out afterwards that we were trying to unite the whole of Tobago in order to speak with a voice so that our power will come to Tobago. And then when that power comes to Tobago, then, as you know, each political party will go that I would want to run it. Somebody going to win and become the government in Tobago. Somebody may become the opposition to become check and balance. When they found that out, they were in trouble. And that is why I am so disappointed in what we call now the PDP. I'm very disappointed.
Okay.
Just leave it.
Let's leave it there for the time being.
Yeah.
Let's go back now to
may I just point out quickly before Reggie comes in that the young people must find a way, when all is said and done, to take responsibility for this issue. When we were young, we took responsibility for bringing an end to racism, marched the streets. We didn't have no quibble and quarrel. We took it on and we said, this is where we are. When Robinson came and he said, let's fight for international government, young people, including myself at the time, jumped on board and said, let's fight. Because when you're young, you could look 50 years down the road. When you're my age, you could look 2, 3, you can't look. So you need young people to take over the issue.
If you have Reggie as your model, you probably have about 20 to go.
I love it. The problem, let me just stick in one word. The problem here, Dr. Winford, is the influence coming out of Trinidad. The influence in the Tobago politics coming out of Trinidad is the flying the ointment in Tobago.
Yes.
That's the problem.
And I actually want Reggie to come in on what that last point you just made, which you just repeated there. So let's go to Elder Dumas. Yes. You know, Elder Dumas, you started off by saying that you're a disappointed man at this point in time on the matter of Tobagonian autonomy. Very disappointed man. Now, the idea has been posited in this conversation that for Tobago to do well in terms of governance, it needs to separate, it needs to have a reform that separates the executive from the legislature. If we were to have a bill, Elder Dumas, that did that, would that relieve you of your disappointment or reduce it somewhat?
Well, we reduce it to an extent. But, that is not all there is in self-government and autonomy. That may be an aspect. I'm speaking overall, the whole issue of internal self-government and autonomy. And what Vanas said about the young people having a major role to play is something that I cannot disagree with. If the people of Tobago want internal self-government, they must make it clear that they want internal self-government. They must make it clear not merely to the government, but to the opposition, to all the politicians involved in both Trinidad and Tobago. by way of petitions, by way of, I say by way of some marches, although people don't like to march here, by telephone calls, by television interviews, whatever. They must make it clear. They cannot say that they want internal self-government and leave it only to a few people like you, Chairman, like Vanas, like Hochoy, and one or two others, to say, well, yes, internal self-government is a good thing. Because, I come back to the point that I made earlier, I do not see the political will on either side, either government or opposition, to have internal self-government of a meaningful kind. Yes, they will come up with legislation saying, using some nice words. I mean, we've had legislation in the past, both the 1980 and the 1996 Act. And there's a 2018 bill before the Joint Select Committee now, which, as far as I can recall, doesn't even define Tobago. So I'm not sure what that means. Until the people of Tobago say, this is what we would want, this is what we want, this is how we see things, then nothing much will happen. And in that context, I was a little, well, very, in fact, taken aback by a statement made by the last Chief Secretary, Mr. Orville London, when he was winding up the debate on the 2016 bill in the Tobago House of Assembly shortly before he demitted office. When he said, I'm not going to read it out, but I mean, the verbatim record is there. When he said that he was not sure that Tobago was ready for internal self-government. Now, if the Chief Secretary, after the forum of political parties that Hochoy was involved in and others, if after all of that, if after talking about bringing in a bill, the Chief Secretary can say, I am not sure that we are ready for internal self-government, I am left a little more than disenchanted, more than puzzled. I just don't understand what's going on.
Yes.
So
he had changed direction, you think? He had changed direction?
Well, I wonder if that was his direction all along. I don't know. I can't
Somebody had gotten to him and changed his discourse?
This could well be so, or maybe it was...
You remember when he came into office, when he started office, he talked about Tobago having to catch up with Trinidad. Do you remember that? I'm sure Hochoy does.
No, I don't remember.
But do you remember him saying that?
No, I don't recall.
Tobago needed to catch up for several years in his first term. He kept harping on that, and then he changed his music after. Probably wasn't getting where.
Well, it was a question of, well, is Tobago really ready?
Yes.
That made me more disappointed.
Because he almost threw you into the into depression, the throes of depression there when he confused you there.
Here you are talking about internal self-government, how Tobago needs internal self-government,
and then turn around.
Your long in office, you say, but I'm not really sure that we are ready for internal self-government.
Wow.
The
Prime Minister, Elder Dumas, the Prime Minister was to say that Tobago he was not sure that Tobago knew what it wanted legislatively. Do you remember that? With respect to the bill that went to the Parliament and lapsed. After people like Hochoy were involved in the formulation of that bill, after wide consultation or so-called wide consult, and I'm not talking about the John Prince bill, I'm talking about the other one. The Prime Minister was to say to the country, are you not so sure what Tobago wanted? Once we determine what Tobago wanted, and one thought that bill was an indication, a representation of what Tobago wanted. I'm sure you're aware of these trends.
I recall the statement.
Yes.
I do recall the statement.
So when you have, the young people must not pay attention to some in a particular generation and rely on their own resources. And, you know, because there are some people who don't bother to consult with the older people because they fear that they are going to be given advice that would be negative. Like whole stray will happen in due course, you know, give us one more term. Yeah. Remember, we have a fight on our hands in Trinidad.
Exactly.
You don't hear those sentiments expressed?
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Wow.
I agree with you entirely. It is up to the young, not only the young people, but to a large extent the young people. And a lot of them are members of Civil Net, and this is something that they should be not merely discussing. We like to talk a lot in this country, and when we finish talking, we start talking again. They should be actually working out a program of action on, as to the achievement of internal self-government for Tobago.
Thank you.
I hope the civil do something on that.
Well, there are different groups that are actively engaged, and they're holding conversations. They're bringing people, different voices to bear on the issue. Let's go to First Chief Secretary again and ask him whether, in fact, he believes that the bright young people who are coming out of the university, more Tobagonians, for example, are accessing tertiary education, right? They're not simply stopping at an undergraduate degree. They're moving on to tertiary education. Never mind, they're finding it difficult to have proper employment or to make their own employment. But there is the comment that the younger, brighter people, or the young, bright people, are in fact giving up their responsibility to challenge the existing political protocols in the party. They're giving up their responsibility in obeisance to the stability, for example, of the PNM, the so-called bill. And the question is whether in fact they are not doing themselves a grave injustice. First Chief Secretary, do you have a comment to make on the reported attitude of young people in relation to their role, the role that you are recommending for them? Elder Dumas has recommended the role. You yourself have done so. I'm just asking you to zero in on a particular aspect of it. And Professor Vanus James has done so as well.
Dr. James, let me quickly say that I am troubled, I believe, just like Elder Dumas, I'm troubled because we are confusing. We are confusing the younger population. I have had several conversations over the years with them, and including now, this very period we are involved in. And what is coming across is that they don't know, they don't understand what, truly some of them don't understand what internal self-government means, what are the benefits of it to them and the people of Tobago, the island of Tobago, and to Trinidad and Tobago. They don't know, because we are sending a message, a choo-choo message, Dr. James himself, you, Elder Dumas, and so on. But they are getting another message coming out of Port of Spain. And because of the fact that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and I read something from a great thinker of France, I think is Molière, he said, listen to me, that the only thing that government cannot do is to change a man into a woman and a woman into a man. They could do anything else. And when you hear the government, you have a government of Trinidad and Tobago sending a message where people have to depend upon that government for employment and everything else. And you are saying what Charles and Dumas and James and Vanus and they are saying is not accurate. We're confusing the population. We are confusing the young people, and that is where they are. And that is why I think I agree with Dr. James and Elder Dumas. We need to take this matter including you, take this matter very seriously and go out there and educate our people in Tobago to tell them the resources we have on this island, what self-government will do in every aspect of our life, including our education and so on in Tobago. And I am sure once we do that, they are going to be on board and they are going to take this decisive action that we are saying that they ought to take and take their responsibility seriously. We are going to be on the right road. Other than that, we're going to be spinning top in mud. Because we're confusing them. Mixed messages.
Okay, thank you. Professor Vanos, are you there?
Yeah,
There's a recipe that Ho Choi has just given us there. He's talking about mentors, Tobagonian mentors, going the length and breadth of the island, and to use his word, educating the public with respect to autonomy, and in particular, how autonomy can improve their lives in various administrative areas of government. Where is my friend, my brethren, Vanos? Are you there?
I am here.
Right. You heard that question. You heard how fulsome First Chief Secretary was in identifying people who could inform the younger population with respect to the benefits of autonomy in the various aspects of administration. Do you concur? Are there enough of us?
Yeah.
Do we have a role for the schools?
There is no problem of the intellectual resources and the political resources on an aggregate scale. Tobagonians must know by now, after 60 years or so, that you can't rely on the PNM to address this issue. They ought to know that. I don't think there is any doubt about that. And the evidence we have is that the vast majority of Tobagonians do not belong in the PNM. They are the ones who have to wake up and take responsibility for where Tobago will go. That's what happened under the Robinson, Murray, Charles, Nicholson coalition that created the Tobago House of Assembly. We are at another historical juncture here, where if we don't seize the moment soon, as Reggie pointed out, we'll find ourselves in a wilderness for a long, long time. But I think the resources are available, and it's not any particular individuals. What you have to have is clear leadership on the issue. Robinson he didn't provide perfect answers, but he provided an open platform. I remember Robinson sending a message to Tapia, where I was doing work at the time. Please encourage Vanos to come and participate in this critical agenda for Tobago. I remember that, and that was the kind of openness you're talking about. So I think we are back at another juncture where we need leadership of the kind that would appeal with credibility now. Now, this is not just old talk appeal. This is credible appeal. People must see clearly that those who are speaking, the young people who are speaking, are committed to the cause and are willing to be inclusive in their approach to the issue. Let me make one critical point that will matter in the end, depending on what we try to do. That critical point is that young people are going to need to understand the true meaning of good governance. Ho Choi has been trying to say tonight that you need government with at least the two critical dimensions. You need to have a legislative function and an executive function. Let's leave the judiciary to one side. If you look at the THA as it is designed now, it is far too small to allow for a legislative function. You can have a legislature and an executive in a single house like you have it in Westminster. But for that to happen, the executive has to be a very tiny share of the whole legislature so that the non-executive members dominate the legislature and can form coalitions to dictate and to oversee the work of the executive. Young people have to penetrate those kinds of issues and make a decision as to what they're willing to fight for. As an alternative to that, of course, you could consider the challenges that the American
Do you think the new bill that is coming from the JSC that will include an idea such as that?
No, that bill, I think the 2018 bill and all that the JSC is doing should be scrapped, and you should take to Parliament a very simple bill. A simple bill that provides for Tobago's rights. And let Tobago people come here and work out what type of government they want, just like we are here working out what type of economy we want and what type of social relations we want among ourselves. I don't think you could get a parliament in Trinidad to write down a legislative form for Tobago and call that internal self-government. That is going way too far. You need to have a very simple mechanism that says, here are your rights: concurrence rights, right to share in the economy, definition of Tobago, right to set up your own government, and so on. And the concurrence is what binds the two islands. So we're not pursuing political.
Well, I hope some
once
viewers
you think of it that way, we're ready to go. But and that could pass. May I point out, Winford, simple constitutional reform provisions like that could pass if we take the time to go to Trinidad and explain to both the opposition and the government, as Tobagonians, that this is what we are proposing. I don't see the opposition, despite what Reggie said about their new commitment not to support the government. They're not supporting the government in this, and that they're working with Tobagonians. And it is the Tobago people who have to go to them and say, this is what we are asking you to back. And
must we force our way into their consciousness, Manos?
Absolutely. You have to talk to people. You have to lead. The leadership has to come from Tobago. I don't think Tobagonians could ever expect Rowley, as a man representing Diego Martin, to understand what we are talking about. He has no clue.
Got you.
He can explain this to the UNC. He doesn't have the mentality to take on that responsibility, as you pointed out, Winford, in one of your articles a while ago that Terry commended you about. He simply has not owned the issue in that way. And I don't think he can. I think Tobagonians, Rochoy said Tobago young people are being confused. They ought to have clear eyes. If they look, they could see this is not an issue Rowley is willing to own, and that is why he spent 5 years promising it, and now promise it after the last election, and still promising it.
So, Vanos, you doubt his sincerity?
I doubt his understanding. I think Rowley is really a Trinidadian by birth. He does not embrace, he's not seized of the issues that preoccupy us who live here. We are trying to build a Tobago economy. He's trying to run Trinidad. His goal has been to be prime minister. He's prime minister. He's running that. That's his agenda. My agenda, like Ochoy and Reggie and so on, is to fix Tobago's business after 131 years in this wilderness. That's
and you have never heard the prime minister stand up and represent Tobago in the way that you're talking. Absolutely. You never heard him once.
I have never heard. I may be, the historians may prove me wrong, but I have never heard any clarity. And not only that, let me say this. I mean, I don't want to, this is not a discussion about the prime minister, but as a general rule, the entire agenda of the PNM from Williams to now has never been clear about how to develop the economy. And unless you are clear about that, you cannot be clear about why you need autonomy and internal self-government for Tobago. You have to understand that Tobago brings a particular approach that only it can deliver to transform the national economy. And it must be able to take decisions to transform the national economy just the way Trinidad could. That equality of perspective, doing something different to what they're doing in Trinidad. Trinidad is preoccupied with energy and manufacturing. Tobago cannot be and is not. And if Tobago's perspectives are to dominate the national landscape, that cannot be led by Trinidad. And that's the fundamental case for internal self-government and for autonomy. And once we understand that, You can't look to Trinidad. You can't look to Rowley. Even if he's a genius, you can't look to him to deal with this issue. He's simply not preoccupied with it. It's not his business. Tobagonians have to take on the responsibility and pursue the issue on our terms to fix the nation. We must act as if we are equals with Trinidad. We are two islands. We have, them is half. That is the story. No matter the population size.
I'll give you one more chance to speak. Just a minute, Hochoy. I'll give you one more chance, Vanos, to speak because we are nearing the end. So prepare a statement in the meantime. Everybody will get that chance. But Hochoy wants to intervene here.
No, I just wanted to say to Vanos, just remind him when he said that Robinson would have come to the Tapia House movement and asked to send Vanos to help. And I think that is the mission I was on. You must remember, I just want to stick this in.
Remember that?
Wait, no, I want to stick this part in and remind him that as chief secretary, I went to Tapia House movement to Lloyd Best and asked him, I want to get somebody to help write the development plan for Tobago. And he said, Vanos is the man. And I went searching for him. That is how Vanos came to Tobago. So
I remember your patience until he came home.
And it has not changed. It's the same agenda.
Because you see, his home has been the Caribbean. You know that, Hochoy?
I know that. In fact, it's larger than the Caribbean, but primarily about the Caribbean.
Okay. What I do know is that he has found that the problems of Trinidad and Tobago are common across the Caribbean.
Yeah. We discuss all of those matters.
Right. And the literature is there to prove it. Yes, so let's go now for final statements, but I'm going to ask you a little question before you make your final statement. So let's go to Ambassador Dumas. Yes? Is the distinguished gentleman still with us?
I'm still here, sir.
He is. Elder Dumas, do you suppose that one of the problems for the political lethargy of Tobagonians in moving on this issue is a fear of bucking the PNM tide? There are reprisals in store for those who try to buck the PNM tide? Do you think that's part of it?
Yes, I think that's part of it. And mostly I think it's a question of jobs, money. And that if you, because as we all know, the bulk of the employment in Tobago is provided by the government,
state,
by the which is a very unhealthy situation altogether. But of course, it's the employment that is provided. And people don't want, especially these days, to lose their job. Whether it's your CPEP or URP or whatever it is, you have a job. You get some money at a certain point. So that even if you disagree with a lot of what is coming out of Port of Spain, you don't want to open your mouth. There is quite clearly an element of fear that you might be dealt with in a certain way if you were to dare to disagree on anything or to present a position that is different from the one that you are supposed to hold.
Excellent. Thank you. Hochoy, we come to you, and I want to ask you, as you make your final statement, whether you agree with the observation of some in Tobago and younger people that you have passed your political prime and you are no longer relevant. What do you think of a sentiment like that, which I have heard? First Chief Secretary, the question is yours.
Yeah, I now get it. I'm now back on. I just unmute my microphone.
Right,
to say to you, I don't understand the question. I don't understand what is meant by the statement or by the position taken.
Yes.
But let me put it in this context. I am not looking to be anything, for example, like become a prime minister or a chief or anything like that, you know. My involvement in this struggle is to make sure that Tobago gets its power and is free and liberated from Trinidad. And then I demit the scene, the active political scene. So it's not about me. It's about the whole entire Tobago society. All of us, Vanos, myself, you, Elder Dumas, all of us, getting together to do what is required of us to be done once God give us life, in order to see that Tobago is free and Tobago gets its power, so we are liberated in order to organize our society the way we think fit. Not about any individual. And you can't exclude a Tobagonian from that struggle, regardless of his age, his condition of birth, wherever he is. But when you start to individualize or personalize things, you're looking as though Troy want to become or Vanos want to become, we end up with a problem. What we're doing is to make sure that all of us come together and make sure the people will decide who they would want to lead them into anything at all. And that's a democracy. The people will decide that. But we are out there to make sure we bring them, give them our knowledge, our experience, and prepare them for the work that lies ahead. You cannot be too old to join in a struggle to liberate yourself and your children and your country.
I say amen to that, First Chief Secretary. Thank you. And now we come to Vanos to make a final comment. And before he does, I want to remind him that we have had multiple conversations in which we have come reluctantly to the conclusion that the millennium is a little distance away. Vanos, do you still believe that the millennium is a little distance away?
Well, change takes a long time, in all societies. When Reggie was going to school in Cambridge, British people used to say, you can't think if you don't learn Latin.
Yes.
So that was a consequence of Roman domination.
Yes, of course.
1,000 years. So
Yes.
It takes a long, long time to make
That's
change.
why I won the Latin prize.
There you go. But I think we have learned
that I too did Latin at Bishop's High and won the prize.
Let me point out though that we have learned tonight a lot from listening to Hocho. I think Hocho's last statement there is a wonderful statement for young people to embrace. When all is said and done, there is something called Tobago, and these are the people we love, and these are the people we want to fight for. And it's not about being chief secretary or being secretary of X or Y. It's about bringing your influence and your resources to bear to create a better future for the young people who will inherit Tobago. And I think I heard that from both Hochoy and Reggie.
But I don't want you to forget.
Words of wisdom.
I don't want you to forget, because we only have about a minute left. I don't want you to forget. Is the millennium coming, or we must bring it ourselves?
We have to bring it. None of it is going to come. What we're trying to do, what the Tobagonians need to know we're trying to do, is build a self-respecting, viable Tobago society, anchored on a strong economy.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we have to fight for it. Nobody's going to give it to us. Trinidadians are surely not going to give it to us. We have to fight for it. And step one in that process is autonomy. Once we get that, we can help the nation to build a viable economy, to fight for space in the global environment.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Gentlemen, you have all been very brave. You have presented Tobago and the rest of the world with sterling presentations on your take with respect to autonomy for Tobago. You are clearly independent men who are prepared to say your mind based, of course, on the evidence of history and the evidence of intellectual depth. I was very fascinated listening to you guys. I have sat at your feet. Oh, you are all my elders, except for one of you, of course, who's my brethren, of course. But you know, it was good listening to you guys, and I'm hoping that the viewers share the optimism with which I am ending this latest installment of the initiative of CivilNet, Tobago CivilNet, and this is an organization that is, you know, neutral. It doesn't have any political affiliations. It's part of Tobago civil society. May you guys and the viewership ponder at least some of the ideas, some of the innovations that have come out of this conversation. Good night to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, good night, good night, good night, Ochoy, man. And Reggie, have a nice rest.
Yes, you yourself, and we need to talk.
Yes, all right, no problem.
Good.
I'll look for you.
Yeah, we must sit down and talk. We have to sit down and talk.
I'll come
we
and
need
look
to.
for you.
Yeah. We used to have a lot of that, you know, virus, as you know.
I know. Yeah,
we have to continue that discussion.
We have to get back to that, indeed.
Yeah, man. Good.